Hi everyone, welcome to Rendering Teardown section. My name's Simon. Today we're going to have a look at this really interesting and dense theme park slash commercial center rendering. Well, as you can see, like the overall image is really good. There's a lot of tiny details and informations, and basically the project is quite interesting. It's not really my kind of thing, but still I quite like how it looks. We're gonna start with composition as usual, because there are a couple of things we can say about that. In terms of composition, we do have so we're dealing with some sort of aerial view. We're not that high, but I think it's, in terms of height, we're sort of at the right height because we have a nice view on the project, and we do have a nice scenery in the background. The only thing I can find that is a little bit disturbing is the fact that there's two things. The sky here is really, there's really not much, so I would suggest adding a little bit of it, because you can actually sort of see it directly here. Just when I move up the format, you can see there's the feeling that there's more light coming in the image, and that it actually feels brighter. So I wouldn't at first you set the height at this level so that we would get the upper third almost at the horizon. But the thing is, I don't think we have to go this far. I think something like that would be, yeah, let's go with something like that. So you see it's a little bit different. Format was that, and it was a little bit too close to the mountains. Second thing I think is a little bit problematic is it's just the perception of it, but it's a tiny bit weird, is that instead of the horizon is not perfectly legible. It looks as if the mountains were warped around some sort of small curve, and it is a little bit disturbing. So I don't know if this is actually the case, but it would be a little bit better if we managed to read some sort of a little bit clearer horizon line, or at least something that is really horizontal. In the same way, I think, I'm not really sure, it's quite hard to imagine like that, but you can see the verticals are, well, they're not vertical. Since we're doing a aerial view, it's not it could not be a problem, but still I think they should, you don't have to have them perfectly vertical, but I would still try to correct them a little bit, because this part especially is looking weird. Basically, logically, everything that is sort of close to the outside of the image is starting to converge way too much to our perspective point. So I would try to correct that a little. It'll be the reason is quite simple. It's always easier to insert people when they're supposed to be perfectly vertical, because otherwise you're gonna have to find the right angle to insert them, and you're gonna have to change it as you depending on where you place them in the image, which is not really convenient. Last thing in terms of, well, it's not strictly speaking composition, but still is regarding the foreground. It's quite interesting to have you have a bright and perfectly lit background, middle ground as well, with nice reflection and stuff, and the foreground is a little bit darker, which is interesting in terms of composition. The thing is, I don't know how you could actually deal with it, but This here it's actually not that bad. I mean, like, the thing is, it's super, like, it's not super bright, but it's quite bright compared to the surroundings. And the thing is, it's just a plain, like a simple rooftop. The good thing is you do have textures, although it's a little bit tiling, but still it's sort of okay. The thing is, when you look at these guys here, they're like, they almost look like there's no textures and there's nothing happening on them, and they're a little bit too, like, they're not catching the attention too much, but still there might be something you want to do. Like, it could be something as easy as just cropping them, but still maybe it's a little bit too easy. Or something that, like, at least add a little bit of definition like that on these guys. Maybe it's a matter also of adding billboards or stuff like that. I really don't know. It's just, it's still, here it looks a little bit plain. Another thing detail-wise regarding the background is, like, I think it's like the idea is it's there, but it's not really well done, as, like, you can see the transition here. Basically, the transition from here to here is quite I mean, subtle. Like, you can see the depth idea, like this, the contrast is a little bit less visible, and there's a tiny bit of blur. But the thing is, the discrepancy between these guys and these guys is way too visible. So what you would need, and especially when you have this kind of contrast here, so the idea is there, as in, like, the further you are, the, like, basically the differences is going to be, you're going to get a little bit of blur, a little bit of noise, and the contrast is a little bit lower. So that's the 3 points you have to keep in mind when you sort of doing background integration. The thing is, it has to be like there's some sort of gradient where it's supposed to happen. You cannot be like that and then everything's blurred out. It might, of course, come just from the fact that you don't have, like, a proper image to insert, but still, if you have to find a way, because that's the thing, is, like, it's not serving the idea, especially since it seems to be quite a simple skyline. You could almost model it or something like that, so, or at least try to find stuff and patch them. Some weird stuff happening there, but anyway. Next thing is gonna be, like, main topic, I think, is regarding the shadows of the, like, basically shadows of the overall image and shadows of the cutouts as well. This, I'm thinking about it because of what I'm seeing here. Basically, it's really, like, you can see or understand that this is like a big mix of 2D and 3D, like 3D rendering and 2D post-processing. So when you look at it like that, it looks okay. There are a couple of things that do stand out that I think would be, like, we're gonna have to clean, but basically what I'm gonna talk about just after that. The thing is, the problem with this kind of image is that even though you have to keep in mind the big picture, you still have to really take into account the tiny details, because the idea in this sort of thing is that people are going to want to look at what's happening sort of at a people scale, and if stuff are, like, weird at this scale, then they're not gonna be able to sort of project themselves into the image. So as you can see here, basically the reason why I'm talking about shadows is that we do have our sun here, or at least I hope it's here, because everything shows that it's here. It's actually really, like, I really like the sort of small flare and bloom and whatever, really nice. And it's well done. The thing is, when you look at, like, just for these guys, for example, you can see the shadows. Like the sun is coming from this side, is going this way, and the shadows are, they're a little bit too, I don't know, because this guy is really far away, so basically the shadows should be going towards us, and it's not really, like, we're not really feeling it. The thing is, it's in the background, so it doesn't really matter. Like, what you could actually do is just not get rid of them, but put everything a little bit darker, so that you only have the top of your trees that get the light, because here it's a little bit too dense. The thing is, when you look at the rest of the image, there are some weird things, because here, for example, we do have like nice soft shadows, like cast shadows from the balustrade here. The thing is, when you look at this guy, it's the same. We do have like this soft transition, but when you look at the ground, it doesn't look really as if it was dark. Like, there are so many transition and different shadow intensities that you actually don't really get what's happening. And I guess the problem is with these artificial light that sort of makes it complicated. The thing is, there has to be, like, if strictly speaking, like this, basically this is natural shadow, and this is the shadow of some palm trees somewhere. The thing is, this is necessarily a natural shadow, which means it cannot be darker than the one you have here. Basically, the idea, as well as we have here, is that this guy, for example, is in the shadow, so its shadow must be way softer than it is. And if we were trying to deal with artificial lighting, then this guy should have a shadow going this way, then a shadow going this way, then a shadow going this way, then a shadow going this way. So it's really complicated to take this into account. And the thing is, even when you're here, like looking at the old picture, the shadows are so dark and contrasting with the ground that they do catch the eye quite efficiently, not in a good way. So I would actually try to decrease them as much as possible. And you can see they're like, I don't know, it's quite complicated. So I would try to sort of blend them in the image, basically, like try not to, because basically the idea as well is that since the sun is setting, you can sort of expect that everything at the ground level is in the shadow, basically, except in open areas like this one, or well, basically just this one. So you shouldn't bother really with shadows at this point, and just try to, it would be more like, you know, of some sort of small soft shadow on the ground, but it doesn't really take the shape of the dude. It's just like a cast shadow on the ground. That way it's easier to do. You don't have to bother with like the orientation of the sun, and it's still like, it would be less dark than this, and it would still be realistic because there's some sort of ambient light going on, and it would catch less the eye. The other thing regarding the cutouts that is a little bit problematic as well, and that you can actually catch from like this view, or if you go into any close-ups, is that you can see there are huge discrepancies of scale, and sometimes if people are far apart it doesn't matter, but in this case, for example, this dude is like twice the height of these girls, and they're not like kids or whatever. And you can see the shadows completely different, the lighting's completely different, etc. So you have like these guys look like 3D people, which is actually why I'm wondering where these shadows come from. But anyway, but at least you can use them to know how to scale other people. Like these guys look super small as well, these guys as well. And as I said earlier, it doesn't really matter when you're looking at it like from the broad idea and the complete image, but if you start noticing stuff like that once you zoom in, it's a little bit problematic. Also this kind of thing, it's the same as with the background. Try to keep a consistency in terms of resolution and quality basically. And if you only have low resolution people, just put them far enough in the background so that it doesn't really matter if they're low resolution. Like, you know, these guys, for example, they're like maybe 50 pixels, but it doesn't really matter. For this people here, it's a little bit more problematic because they're way more in the background. So yeah, be extra careful with the size and scaling of people, because it can be really obvious when it's not good. Final thing, I was looking at first the black and white version just to check the contrast, and at first I thought it was okay. I still think it's like really like almost perfect. I just think it does lack a little bit of contrast on some part of the image. And while I was trying, the main issue I had was with the color. In terms of saturation, we do have stuff that are, I think it's okay. It might be a little bit too saturated, but I guess it can come with the feeling we're trying to achieve. I mean, it's something that's supposed to be sort of joyful and etc. So it doesn't matter if it's a little bit oversaturated, since it's like really a tiny bit. The thing is, when I was checking the colors, I find it to be a little bit too homogeneous. As you can see, we only have like one main hue and a couple of like tiny patches of darker areas, but we don't have like a strong basically the idea is that would be nice is to get two different hues, at least, not at least, but yeah, 2 or 3 mainly. I guess it can come from, I quite like the sky, so I don't think it comes from here. What I was trying to do earlier is actually, trying to play around with the levels, but playing with different channels. So as you can see here, the difference is that we're putting away a bit of orange to change it with something that's slightly more green, and we also are catching like more blue here, which I think was quite interesting. As you can see, the difference is not, well, it's noticeable, but the thing is, it enhances the sunlight from here, and it enhances the shadows, which is quite good, and also it adds a little bit of contrast. And then I added another layer here that increases a little bit again. It's quite different, because the thing is, when you look at the sunlight here, in terms of color, it's a little bit weird because it's kind of green. So whereas when you put this here, it looks whoops, I'm gonna put that here actually. Yeah, that makes more sense, like that. And so yeah, as you can see, it looked a little bit green, which is a little bit weird for a sun. So with these new levels, it's a little bit more orange here and there, and on the exposed part, and then it's all way darker and blue on the rest of the image, which is, I think, a little bit better, or at least conveys a little bit better the idea of a strong like main soft lighting here. You might want to change a little the contrast again, because there might be a little bit too much contrast, but still I would still leave it that way. Well, it's about 20 minutes. I'm gonna stop there. Still, I really hope you've understood the main points. Basically, the idea beside what I was saying earlier regarding the image, the colors, is to really, even though like that's what is complicated with this kind of image, you have to keep in mind the bigger picture, which means that's why we change a little bit the composition, etc. And then you have to keep in mind the smaller picture in terms of, like I didn't say, but basically the storytelling in the image I think is really working well. There are many stuff happening and it looks sort of logical, but still you have then, in terms of techniques and complexity and consistency, you have to be careful that you don't have like blurred people next to normal people, etc. And then the image will be awesome. That will be it. Hopefully you've learned interesting things, and I'll see you in the next teardown. Bye guys.